All right, what is going on, everybody? How is everybody doing today? Happy Friday, and welcome back to another episode of the Just Ballin' podcast. So for today's episode, I want to talk about the all defensive teams, and I think there's some debate on who should be where, and I'm going to plead my case for who I think should make first team and second team. We're going to go into some analytics that I'll kind of explain what they mean, and who I think could also be like an odd man out in this as well, because I think there's 11 guys that deserve it the most. So somebody's obviously going to get left off. So you guys will be listening to this and seeing this on Friday, April 12th. On Monday's episode, once the regular season ends, I will be doing probably something very similar, but with the all NBA teams, going through first team, second team, third team, and who I think should be making it from those as well. And this is now positionalist. So yeah, I think this is probably better for the defensive teams. Now, it helps out for the All-NBA teams for centers specifically because they're obviously limited to 3 spots, while guards and forwards are limited to 6 spots. Now, for defense, usually the best defenders in the league are big men. So I think that this will help that out. Like for my first team, we have 3 big men making it that I think only one of them would make it if it was the old rule. So I like this because I do think that those 3 are probably 1, 2, and 3 in Defensive Player of the Year voting as well. So yeah, we're going to be going into that basically. And just to kind of some things to talk about before we get into this, I'm going to mention LeBron, or defensive LeBron. It's a statistic that stands for luck adjusted, estimated using a box prior, regularizes on and off. So it's just kind of worded that just to be LeBron. It's basically somebody's contribution using the box score and on-off calculations for a holistic evaluation per 100 possessions on and off the court. I will also be using estimated plus minus, or the defensive version of that, just pretty much D, defensive EPM, estimated plus minus. It's pretty much an all-in-one metric that estimates a player's contributions to the team in points per 100 possessions. An average EPM is around -1, and it can range from -8 to 8. That, I think I like T. LeBron a little bit more. Estimated plus minus does value a lot on your team success as a whole and where you are defensively, so that's something to keep in mind when you're talking about teams at defense as a whole. Like for Wembanyama, for an example, the Spurs defense isn't great, so he could get docked a little bit in that, but Wemby's also on another planet where it really doesn't matter too much. And then we're going to go into defensive win shares, which is a basketball reference analytic, and it's pretty much an estimated number of wins a player adds due to his defense. So it's tough for the all defensive teams because it's not like the NBA season is PFF, Pro Football Focus, and there's 17 games a year and everybody can watch every single snap and analyze every single play. For defense, or excuse me, for the NBA, there's a lot of games in every year, and maybe there's people out there that watch every single highlight of every single team, or every single highlight or a play of every single player. But I will tell you, 99.9999, maybe even 100% of the people that are voting for all defensive teams have not seen every defensive highlight from everybody we are mentioning, or just everybody that could be in consideration from this award. So you have to use some defensive analytics to make your case here, and we don't have really perfect defensive analytics yet. This is still pretty much all work in progress, and it's not perfect yet because it's really an eye test thing, or it's subjective. What was a good defensive play? What wasn't? Does a defensive statistic take into account a player switching off ball or kind of playing good off ball defense? No, not really. But you can look at some other defensive analytics through NBA stats and their analytics dashboard on their website, which is a great use as well. I would definitely recommend that. So yeah, we're gonna get into this. I'm excited. If you guys are on YouTube, you can let me know in the comments what you guys think of my all defensive teams. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, let me know on Twitter. If you can leave a rating and review, just takes 2 seconds. It goes a long way. I'd appreciate that a lot, and follow over there. And just follow, just so you guys can get alerted when I come out with a new podcast. I'm hoping I'll get one out for you guys this week, maybe on Sunday, maybe. But if not, then we'll just go back to the regular schedule Monday, because I was in Atlanta this past week, so I wasn't able to get an episode out for you guys on Monday. So all defensive teams, let's get into this. All right, so all defensive first team, let's make the case. There's, in my opinion, 4 locks. I think there's one player that could fall to second team. And when I go over my second team, I'll have, I think one guy that I think could be interchangeable with that player for the first team. So start off Rudy Gobert. Right now, he's the betting favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year. The more I dug into these analytics, into watching these guys on film, I kind of like Wemby as my Defensive Player of the Year. I may switch up on that. And I know team defense should maybe play some part of this, but Wemby isn't playing with Anthony Edwards. He's not playing with Jaden McDaniels or Naz Reid and Mike Conley. He's playing with a lot of young guys and a lot of bad defenders, like Malachi Branham, not a good defender. Keldon Johnson, not a good defender. Even Devin Vassell this year defensively hasn't been great at times. But we're not really going to get into the defensive player of the year debate. If it goes to Gobert, I'm cool with it. If it goes to Wemby, I'm also cool with it. And if I had a vote, I think I would go with Wemby if I was a voter. I think so. But so start off Rudy Gobert, absolute lock to make this. He has a 2.2 defensive estimated plus minus, which is up there for one of the top guys in the NBA. He's got a 2.86 defense of LeBron, which is second out of any player in the NBA. And you can really tell when you're watching Rudy Gobert, his presence inside, specifically as a post defender, helping the pick and roll. The paint is his. Nobody's really getting a shot up at him, and he's been like that for the past couple of years. And we're seeing a defensive jump even from last year in his first year in Minnesota to this year. His defensive field goal percentage, so basically people shooting at Rudy Gobert, is the lowest in the NBA, 48.8% out of any qualified player. This dude is very good, and obviously he's guarding high-efficient scorers. That's usually the most efficient guys out there are big men. They're going to shoot north of 50% because they're only taking twos close to the basket, and Gobert has the best defensive field goal percentage out of anybody in the NBA. That's wings, that's guards, it's Rudy Gobert, and that's something that is valuable for sure. He's sixth in the NBA in blocks. He is getting 9.2 defensive rebounds per game, which is fourth in the NBA, and he's number one in Basketball Reference's defensive win share at 5.7 wins added because of his defense. And he's also the anchor of the best defensive team in the league. So that, I think, obviously has a huge say in Defensive Player of the Year voting. And I think it should matter a little bit. Like, I think the Depoy should probably be on one of the better defensive teams in the league. Now, Wemby's going to win probably plenty of Depoys in his career when their team gets better. And I guess I'm going to be kind of hypocritical because I just said that I think I'd vote Wemby. It's just, I think, maybe more of a wow factor when I'm watching Wemby, and it's exciting and it's new. And I've seen Gobert for so many years that I kind of expect this out of him. So I think that's on me for not realizing, hey, still, when you look at it, objectively, Gobert should win Depoy. I think it could go 50-50. It's actually a very close race, which is nice and it's exciting. And I think it's a little bit more exciting than maybe last year's with Triple J winning it. So yeah, Gobert is an absolute lock for all defensive first team. The dude is an absolute stud. He's an incredible just overall defender, and he still moves his body so well now that he's even north of 30. Right? I think Gobert is Gobert north of 30? You know what? Gobert might actually not be north of 30 because he was in that 2013 draft with LeBron James. I don't know why I thought he was 31. You know what? He may be, though. No, I just said LeBron James. I meant Giannis Antetokounmpo. Yeah, he is 31. He was in that 2013 draft. Giannis is 29. So is Gobert a little bit older coming out of France? Yeah, I guess so. He was 21 coming to the league. I don't know why I remember that, or didn't remember that. I thought Gobert was like, I guess 19 or 20, because that's usually what these international prospects come over as. So, hey, you learn something new every day. But yeah, Gobert, still an absolute stud defensively and is a lock to be on all defensive first team because he's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year. It's not one of those weird things where we've seen like Tyson Chandler win Depoy, but Marcus Gasol is the big man on all defensive first team. And then obviously I alluded to it, another lock is Victor Wembanyama. He definitely has the wow factor this year defensively. You've seen highlights of like the Grizzlies driving down in the paint and nobody wants to shoot the ball. He has such a gravitational presence down there where you already have it in the back of your mind every time you're just going at a drive when you're playing the Spurs. All right, I have to be at least like 4 feet back than where I needed to be originally because of Victor Wembanyama and his long reach and his ability to block shots at just an absolute elite level. I mentioned that Gobert is, I believe, number 2 in, D LeBron, that defensive analytics statistic. Well, Wemby is number 1, 2.97 to Gobert's 2.86. He is number 6 in defensive estimated plus minus at 3.3. His defensive field goal percentage is 52.9%, which is 3rd in the NBA, which is incredibly impressive for somebody that was 19 years old to basically start the season and is just so young, or is 18 years old and is now 19 years old. So it's just incredible, like the defensive presence inside that Wemby already has in this league. He's 3.6 in blocks per game, or 3.6 blocks per game, which is number 1 in the NBA. He's leading the NBA in blocks as a rookie. And it shows, man. He's gone through 20 game stretches where he's averaging closer to 5 blocks per game than he is to 4 blocks per game. He is one of the best shot blockers we have seen, and he's put up some dumb stat lines where it's a 5x5, where he's getting 5 steals and 5 blocks a night, or he's getting close to 10 blocks some nights. And it's something we truly have never seen, or we haven't really seen since Akeem Olajuwon in the 90s. He's also getting 1.2 steals per game, which is 20th in the NBA for somebody of his size, and that's kind of a guard dominant statistic, at least at the top. So 20th in the NBA, you take that if you're Wemby. So stocks, blocks, and steals combined, 4.8. It's very impressive. It is. He's also averaging 2.8 deflections per game, pretty much self-explanatory, which is 10th in the NBA. Also something you see more from wings in guards. He's averaging 8.3 defensive rebounds per game, which is 8th in the NBA. And he's 5th in defensive win shares added at 4.3. So a little bit less than Gobert. So Wemby is 100% a lock. He's going to finish either first or second in Defensive Player of the Year voting, and he is somebody that is good on the perimeter, and he's shown way more physical presence inside than I thought we were going to see for him right away. He was a little bit skinnier, so I thought, okay, maybe he can get pushed around a little bit in the post. That's not really been the case. Yes, people are able to either maybe go around him or play physical with him inside, but he is holding his own, and he is just incredible on the defensive end of the floor. It's funny because like we're watching all these offensive highlights from Wemby, and he's an incredible player. Well, he's an even better defensive player. So all the stats that I mentioned, the eye test shows out. And like I said, like you've seen those highlights of like the Grizzlies in a 3-on-1 fast break and nobody wants to take it at Wemby. That doesn't show up in the box score. And that won't show up. And I think they even finished, or they scored on that possession, the Grizzlies. But it won't help out the Spurs team defensive rating, which is one of the worst in the league. But it's not because of Wemby. He's an absolute lock for all defensive first team in his rookie season. All right, next up, we're going to talk about our first non-big. We're going to have one more guard, one more big after this guy. So the next guy I want to talk about is Herb Jones. Probably the best perimeter defender out of anybody qualified this year, for sure. That could make an all-defensive team. And Herb Jones, especially in the pick and roll, there's just some half-court sets where he is just, you're not getting by him. You're not scoring on him. And he's somebody that picks up every team's best player. Like Gobert is guarding the big man. Wemby's guarding the big man. Herb Jones is, if it's not Wemby out there on the floor, he's guarding every team's best player, every best wing, every best guard in the league. He is a workhorse. An absolute workhorse on the defensive end of the floor. He's got a 2.1 estimated defensive plus minus. He's got a 1.1 defensive LeBron rating, which is 25th in the NBA, but 7th for all of wings. He's averaging 2.5 deflections per game, which is 17th in the NBA, 1.4 steals, which is 8th in the NBA. He's top 30 in defensive field goal percentage, and he is he is the best defender on the 4th best defensive team in the league. And I think Herb Jones is honestly taking a step offensively this year, but that's even more impressive because he, like I said, is a workhorse defensively. He's guarding every team's best player out there, and that's somebody that deserves to be on the all-defensive team. There's not a statistic, really, that you could see how many minutes he's guarding all-stars in this league, but when you watch film of a game, you're realizing he's picking up anybody out there. Like he's picking up your Luka Doncic's of the world, or he could switch on to Kyrie and still guard him at an elite level, or he's picking up just like, I guess I'm just trying to think of like a random stud that I just watched like them play or somewhat recently, but like he'll guard Devin Booker, he'll guard KD, he'll guard Kawhi Leonard, he'll guard Paul George, he'll guard Steph Curry, he'll guard LeBron, or at least try to. And he is phenomenal on that end of the floor. And I do believe, in my opinion, that Herb Jones should be on an all-defensive team, and he should be on all-defensive first team. I think he should probably finish 4th in the Defensive Player of the Year voting. I do think it's going to be Wemby and Gobert 1 and 2. The other big I'm going to talk about will probably finish 3. And then I think Herb Jones should definitely finish 4 as the best non-big man defender in the NBA this season. All right, next up, we're going to talk about Anthony Davis of the LA Lakers. He's the 3rd big man to make all-NBA or all-defensive first team, and I do think he will finish 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year voting, and that's what I like, that he could be on all defensive first team this year, or even if he doesn't make it, he should definitely make one of the teams for sure. He's averaging 2.6 deflections per game, which is 15th in the NBA. He's getting 9.5 defensive rebounds per game, which is 3rd in the NBA. He's got a 1.9 defensive estimated plus minus. He's number 3 in defensive LeBron at 2.65. His defensive field goal percentage is at 56.8%, which is 17th in the NBA. He's averaging 1.2 steals, which is 21st in the NBA, 2.4 blocks, which is 2nd in the NBA, and number 3rd number 3, in defensive win shares at 4.6 wins added defensively. Anthony Davis has been an anchor for this Lakers team this year. They are a pretty average defensive team. In my opinion, they would be probably bottom 5 in defense if it wasn't for Anthony Davis this year. He is an absolute stud on that end of the floor, still as a rim protector, still as a post defender, great pick and roll defender as well, and is still super athletic to get down the floor in a timely fashion. Anthony Davis, in my opinion, definitely needs, I think he's up there. I think he's closer to Gobert and Wemby defensively than he is to Herb Jones this year, and AD is an absolute stud. That's why he's going to be on an All-NBA team, because yes, he's still a stud offensive player and is the best offensive player on all defensive first team. And maybe, you know what, I'm going through it now. He's the best offensive player out of anybody I'm going to talk about in this video on an all defensive team. And he is also a top 5, in my opinion, top 3 defensive player in the league this season. AD should definitely be on all NBA second team because of how good he is on both ends of the floor. And I think he should be on all defensive first team as well because of how much of a beast he is just for this Lakers team this year. So I had to talk about Anthony Davis. I think he's actually getting a good amount of love. I don't think I've seen too much AD like for DPOY propaganda. So I think people know it's going to be pretty much down between Gobert and Wemby, but I do think AD should finish 3rd in that. Okay, so to wrap out all defensive first team, this is the one guy that I think if he was on second team, I'm cool with it. But if he is not on a team, then I think that is an insane snub. He's been a fun story this year. He's a year 3 player. He's breaking out after kind of being looked as a disappointment in his first year and somewhat of his second year, at least in the first half of that season. And that is Jalen Suggs of the Orlando Magic. So Jalen Suggs is the best, I was going to say the best defender. Now, there's some honorable mentions I have, and there's a 65 game threshold that I still kept it at. Like, Jonathan Isaac is probably the best pure defender on this Orlando Magic team, but he has missed some time this season. So Suggs has been at times the number 1 defender on this team, but if not, the number 2. And I wanted to at least get one guard, like pure guard on this. Like Herb Jones is more of a wing. He's more of a 4 than he is a 2. And Suggs, I wanted to get like I said, a guard on this list as well. So I chose Jalen Suggs over, I have 3 guards on my all defensive second team. So yeah, I went with Jalen Suggs. He's a top 2 defender on the 3rd best defensive team in the NBA. He's got a 1.49 defensive LeBron, which is 15th in the NBA overall and 2nd out of all guards. He's averaging 2.6 deflections per game, which is 15th in the NBA, 1.4 steals per game, which is 9th in the NBA, a 56% defensive field goal percentage, which is 15th in the NBA, and number 1 for guards, number 1 in the whole league, and 25th in defensive win shares added, 3.2, and that is kind of also more favorited for big man as well. So Jalen Suggs as a point of attack defender has been so much fun, and I think he's just been a little bit more exciting as a defender than some of the other guards I had on defensive second team. That's what I went for. I like the story of Suggs. I like watching him, I think, a little bit more, and this is my subjective list. This isn't like a scientific way of choosing this, and I just prefer Jalen Suggs and his high motor defense over some of these other guys. Basically, I mean, like, I'll kind of spoil who's in defensive second team, but he's on a way better defense and has had more to play for than one of the guys that I thought could have made it. And then there's 2 guys on the same team on all defensive second team, so I didn't really, like, they have each other to play off of. It's kind of Suggs out there. Like, he's had a rotation of guards. He's had your Gary Harrises of the world. He's had your Anthony Blacks. At some points, your Markelle Fultzes, your Cole Anthonys. It's not really one, like, pure, like, elite defender next to him, like the other 2 guys I have on all defensive second team. And I think that's deserving, like, just another narrative for Suggs to be on all defensive first team. Like I said, though, if you put him on all defensive second team, it's fine. It's fine. But I do think he needs to be on an all defensive team no matter what. Somebody on this Orlando Magic team has to be, and I don't think Isaac is going to play enough games to really be on that. So I think it should default to Jalen Suggs, who is just a phenomenal defender and is really making himself like a lot of money in this league as a 3-and-D guy because of his improved jumper this year, his improved offensive ability, and just being a beautiful complementary piece to Paolo and Franz as just kind of their sidekick and somebody that can step up and guard elite guards and wings in this league. And Suggs, like I said, he's just a lot of fun to watch. He gets in your face. He can pick you up full court, and he just throws his body around there, like out there. It's insane how much he's improved defensively. I saw some flashes of this at Gonzaga in his rookie season and last year. I didn't think he was going to be all defensive first team or in that conversation position in year 3. So shout out to Jalen Suggs. That is going to wrap out my all defensive first team, where we have Rudy Gobert of the Minnesota Timberwolves, Victor Wembanyama of the San Antonio Spurs, Herb Jones of the New Orleans Pelicans, Anthony Davis of the LA Lakers, and Jalen Suggs of the Orlando Magic. Now let's get into all defensive second team. All right, so the first guy I want to talk about, I think, is my, snub of all defensive first team. If you wanted to sub him out for Jalen Suggs, I'm okay with that. And that's Alex Caruso of the Chicago Bulls. I think it really just came down to like the Bulls not being a good defensive team. But at the end of the day, that's not really on Caruso. It's not his fault that his anchor defensively at the 5 spot is Nikola Vucevic, who is one of the worst defensive centers in the league. Caruso is phenomenal when he's played this year as a perimeter defender, as a point of attack guy, and an on-ball defender, even off-ball as well. He's 4th in steals per game at 1.6. He's 2nd in steal percentage at 2.9%. He's number 1 in the league in deflections at 3.7. He's got a plus 3.4 defensive estimated plus minus, which is 5th in the NBA. And then I believe he's also number 1 for guards as well. And then he also has a 1.74 defensive LeBron, which is number 1 in guards in this league. And then he's also getting 1 block a night as well, which is 3rd out of all guards in the league. And Caruso is just so active on the ball and off the ball. And I think it's even more impressive that the LeBron and defensive estimated plus minus back him up, because those also take into account your team's defensive success, and the Bulls have not been good defensively this year. So I think like we've seen Wemby push those boundaries this year, kind of breaking through as a standout individual defender on a poor defensive team as a big man. And I think it's been Caruso for that for guards in this league as well. And Caruso, I think, deserves some all defensive first team votes. And I think he should 100% be on an all defensive second team. I've seen some people's ballots where he's not even on it. And I'm like, what? Like, are we not watching the same perimeter defender out there on a team where he's not getting much help? Like, yeah, he'll get maybe some help from Dosunmu or Kobe White, but those aren't world-class defenders by any means. And yes, Patrick Williams can show some flashes, but Vucevic, Drummond, not good really rim protecting bigs. I mean, he's playing a lot with DeMar DeRozan out there. Now, when he gets a chance to play with Javon Carter, that's a lot of fun, but there are some limitations offensively with that duo, so we don't see it as much. But Alex Caruso, my first player on all defensive second team, and would be my first guy in if any of the guys in my all defensive first team didn't make it. So shout out to Caruso in Chicago. They probably should have traded him when they could have at the deadline to get multiple first rounders. All right, next up, we have one pair of teammates. So you're going to figure out who the other guy is most likely, but I'm going to go and talk about Derek White. I also think Derek White could be in there for Jalen Suggs, and I would be okay with that because Derek White has been an absolute stud. I think his individual success, I think, is a little bit less lesser known because of how good the Boston Celtics are defensively this year. They're the number 2 defensive team in the NBA behind the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're the best defensive team in the Eastern Conference. He's got a 1.7 defensive estimated plus minus, which is weird because you're watching out there you're looking into that statistic, like why is he that much lower than Caruso? It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but also when you look at the team around them, then maybe that kind of focuses in more on Caruso and helps him out. He's got a 1.38 defensive LeBron, which is 3rd for guards in the NBA. He's got a defensive field goal percentage of 57.5%, which is top 20 in the NBA, 2.1 deflections per game, top 30 in the NBA, number 2 team defense, like I mentioned, a steal a night, which is top 40 in the NBA, but 1.2 blocks. And for guards, that's basic. It's number 2, but the guy in front of him is Scotty Barnes, who you can look at as a guard. You can look at more as a forward. I mean, he's a little bit taller than Derek White. So Derek White is right up there in blocks per game, and he's got 3.5 defensive win shares added, which is 18th in the NBA. And this dude is so active on the ball, off the ball, and I think he's probably the best chase down defensive transition fast break guard in the league, on that end of the floor. This dude will be able to get blocks, steals behind you, and he runs the floor. He hustles his ass off, and that's what I love watching about Derek White. He has grown so much, and I've loved his days in San Antonio when he was drafted out of Colorado, and he has just improved every single year, at least on the defensive end of the floor. And hey, he could win a defensive player of the year at one point. Now, it would be tough for the narrative of the Celtics because Kristaps has been such a good defender. Somebody else we'll get to. I don't want to spoil who the next guy is because maybe it's Jaylen Brown, maybe it's Drew Holiday, maybe it's Jason Tatum. But yeah, Derek White, absolute stud defensively this year, and I think could get defensive first team, and I'm okay with that. I think he definitely belongs on all defensive second team. He definitely does, and I think it's an absolute snub, and it's criminal if he did not make it. So Derek White, second guy on my all defensive second team, joining Alex Caruso. All right, so his teammate, I went with Drew Holiday. I think if you didn't want to have two Celtics on this, that's perfectly fine. They're the only team that has two guys in this. So if you wanted to keep that individually, I mean, I have some honorable mentions that we can get to. There's 11 guys that I'm going to talk about like in depth, and there's some other guys that could be honorable mentions as well. But like I said, for Derek White, Drew Holiday is on the second best defensive team in the NBA, number one in the East. He's averaging just under a steal and block a night, 0.9 steals, 0.8 blocks. He's got a 57.6 defensive field goal percentage, which is fourth out of all guards in the NBA. He's averaging 2.3 deflections per game, which is top 20 in the NBA. 4.2 defensive rebounds, which is top 10 in guards throughout the league. He's got pretty much a half of a defensive LeBron rating at 0.56, which is 14th for guards in the league, and he's 33rd in defensive win shares at 3.1. I don't know if the defensive analytics, like those advanced stats, really tell the story of Drew Holiday this year, because point of attack, like one-on-one, guard on guard, he, I think, is still as good as anybody. I think Derek White, though, better defender in my opinion, at least this year, and I think Caruso as well, and I think those two deserve all defensive first team instead of Holiday, or if it came down to that. But Holiday, I still think, is good enough defensively to make this list, and I think if you look at it in a vacuum, pure Drew Holiday, he's really impacting the defensive end of the floor so much, and he sacrificed so much on the offensive end, which has kind of unleashed him a little bit more defensively. It's just, we're in kind of like, not like a golden age for defensive guards, but between Suggs, White, Caruso, and Drew Holiday, man, those are guys that are, I think, having individual seasons very close to Marcus Smart's Defensive Player of the Year award in 22. That's how good these four defensive guards have been. I think that's like a top four themselves, and I still love Drew Holiday's defense, and I think I caught myself like watching it as well as like Gobert. I'm like, you know what, this is what I expect out of Gobert when I watch it, because he's been such an elite defender for so long. And I think that's something I gotta realize with Drew Holiday as well. Like, this is the norm for Drew, like top 5 guard defense in the league, and Drew Holiday is an anchor. Like him and Derek White, them going back and forth is something you've just like never seen before, and like unleashing them two defensively, like any switch, any off-ball movement, they are everywhere, and they're two of the smartest defenders in the league as well. They know when to fill, they know when to make up gaps in defense, and Drew Holiday's making my all defensive second team. But I gotta have Bam Adebayo here for sure. Bam has got a 2.6 defensive LeBron rating, which is 5th in the NBA. He's anchoring and the best defender on the 5th best defensive team in the league, 3rd in the East for the Miami Heat. He's got a 2.6 defensive estimated plus minus, which is 14th in the league, 57.4% defensive field goal percentage, which is top 15 in the league, 8.3 defensive rebounds a night, which is 8th in the NBA. He's getting 1.1 steals per game, which is 5th out of all bigs, 4.2 defensive win shares, number 7th in the NBA, and 2.2 deflections per game, which is top 30 in the NBA. And I know Bam plays a little bit more physical. I'm not saying like Bam's like a dirty player, but I think he pushes his boundaries a little bit, but he's still one of the most athletic big men in the league. He's probably the most athletic big man, like individually, out of anybody I mentioned. More athletic than Wemby, more athletic than Gobert, definitely, and more athletic than Anthony Davis. And he's got incredible mobility. He's insanely fast, like based on the baseline, and he is still an elite rim protector in this league, and he's been doing that for the last couple of seasons. And it's weird that Bam has never made or won a Defensive Player of the Year, and we've seen like Triple J win it before him, or Marcus Smart, and we're going to see Gobert or Wemby get it this year, and Bam's not really in that conversation. But I don't know if we're in voter fatigue with Bam, because he's never won it, but he's always in that those conversations. But Bam has been incredible defensively again this season, and anchoring this Heat team on all fronts, and he doesn't really get much help in that front court. Like Nikola Jovic is fine, but he's not like that good defensively yet. Kevin Love sold ass he's playing with. So if it's not like Jimmy playing down a little bit, and Jimmy can get a little lackadaisical sometimes, Bam's really on an island out there, and he's guarding the best like wing big sometimes out there on any given night. And Bam, in my opinion, has to make all defensive second team. All right, so my last two spots, it's tough. So all defensive second team, yeah, we have Caruso, White, Drew Holiday, and Bam Adebayo. I have a big and a wing in mind. I'm going to opt for the big, but I completely get if you choose the wing here. So I'm going to choose Isaiah Hartenstein. I'll talk about the wing after I talk about Isaiah Hartenstein. Hartenstein's got a 2.35 defensive LeBron rating, 7th in the NBA, 10th in team defense for the Knicks, and anchoring that team that's lost their rim protector Mitchell Robinson in the beginning of the year. And I think the expectations were kind of low for Hartenstein as a backup 5 in year 2 of this Knicks contract, and his improvement defensively year over year has been insane. He's got a +4 defensive estimated plus minus, which is the best in the NBA. Hey, that's got to mean something. 5 defensive rebounds a night, which is 40th in the NBA. 1.2 steals per game, 2nd for bigs. Yeah, 1.1 blocks per game, and 21st in defensive win shares at 3.3. Yeah, he is just an absolute beast, man. He's an absolute beast defensively, and he has stepped up for the Knicks team that's lost OG Anunoby for quite some time. They lost Julius Randle to some injuries. They moved on from one of their better perimeter defenders in Quentin Grimes. And like Hart has his flashes defensively, same with DiVincenzo. But when OG was out, it was kind of Hartenstein out there. There were some flashes from Achua as well, and Miles McBride, obviously. But down there, it's been Hartenstein, especially sometimes playing out there with Bojan Bogdanovic. Isaiah Hartenstein is one of the more underrated players and defenders in the league. So the odd man out, if you wanted to put him in here, KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He's got a 1.6 defensive estimated plus minus, which is top 30 in the NBA, 8th in team defense for the Denver Nuggets. And honestly, I don't know if he's the best defender on this Nuggets team, because like Aaron Gordon is still great, and honestly, Nikola Jokic is pretty underrated as well. But just pure perimeter defense, especially in big games, KCP has been him. He has 1.3 steals, 14th in the NBA, 14th in defensive LeBron for wings, and 2.4 deflections per game, which is top 20 in the NBA. But I think KCP is somebody where the defensive advanced stats aren't going to tell the whole story with him. When you watch him out there, he really is an absolute beast on that end of the floor and really steps up in big moments. So I do not have Draymond Green, Jonathan Isaac, and OG Anunoby here because they are not going to play enough games. But if they were all playing like 70 games this year, this would have made this so difficult. I'm like trying to think about this. Like Jonathan Isaac, I think have to be on all defensive first team. Same with OG Anunoby. So like that would probably kick off. Like it would definitely kick out Jalen Suggs. Herb Jones not making it would also be kind of criminal. So I don't even know. I'm glad we don't have to come to that because that would be very difficult. And then Draymond Green is still like such a good like defensive anchor and still one of the more smarter defenders in this league. I wanted to give a shout out to Isaac Okoro and Jared Allen of the Cavs. Thought about them in my initial write down. Shea and Chet of the Thunder. I don't know. Lou Dort's defense felt like it's taken a little bit of a step back this year, but it's still good. Still good. And then I also like Giannis and Jaden McDaniels I wrote down as well. Obviously, there's like 20 names. You got to cut it down to 10. So yeah, that was really, really tough. Going just to reiterate it one more time, all defensive first team, Gobert, Wemby, Herb Jones, Jalen Suggs, and Anthony Davis. All defensive second team, Caruso, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Bam Adebayo. And I went with Isaiah Hartenstein, but you could also go with KCP, and I'm okay with it. And then, like I said, Draymond, Jonathan Isaac, and OG would probably make it as well if they put a little bit more games. Had a couple honorable mentions. Oh, man, all defensive teams are tough, but I'm confident with my top 9. I think you can go either way with KCP or Isaiah Hartenstein. So I hope you guys did enjoy this episode of the Just Ballin' Podcast. That was really fun. If you did enjoy it and you're on YouTube, I'd appreciate you dropping a thumbs up. A 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify would go a very long way, so I'd appreciate that a ton. And then maybe hit that follow button if you're not already. Make sure, you're followed because I will be doing this for the All-NBA teams on Monday, so be on the lookout for that. And I'll catch you guys in that episode. Peace.